Hi guys, welcome. So today we're going to be talking about UI programming, and a lot of developers when they start off, they just when they start off with iOS dev, they just use the storyboard file and they drag in elements, and then they connect them using referencing outlets to their .swift files, and they go from there. And a lot of the times that's really good, and some of the times you also need to know how to do some UI programming. And really, what that is it's taking what you're doing in interface builder and it's doing that programmatically in your .swift files, and sometimes that gives you more power over your UI and more control and the ability to customize your UI even better. So in some scenarios that's really useful. So that's what we're going to be going over today. To just start off, the starter code for this project can be found on bitbucket.org. If you search for UI programming demo starter right in your search bar, then it'll show our page. So if you just go for UI programming, yeah, so UI programming demo starter, and you'll find it right there, and you can download it. To download, just go to downloads, branches, and press the zip. And once you have it, here's what the project looks like. It's pretty basic. All I've done really is there's a view controller right here, and the view controller.swift file that it's connected to has an implementation of the table view that's inside this view controller right here. So believe it or not, table views can be used to make really nice forms a lot of the times, and other times they can also be used just to make screens that display data. So today we're going to be making something pretty basic that's going to display data about a place. So let's say your app tells different people some of the attractions of each place, or some of the cool things about different cities. And let's say you click on one of the cities. So the screen that we're going to be making today is going to be that sort of screen that you go to and you find all the information more in detail. So it'd be like a detail screen for an app. So in order to do that, I have a table view already here in this view controller, and it's some of the basic table view code is set up right here. So as of now, we're going to need one section in our table view, 4 rows in our table view, and right here we're going to write some more UI code. So to start off, maybe we want to change what the table view's background is. A lot of the times white just doesn't look that good. Sometimes it does. So we can say table view.background color equals UI color, and we can specify different values for this. I'm gonna say, I know that these values will give us sort of a nice light gray, so I specified that there. And now next thing that we want to do is we want to implement a method, a table view delegate method. So it's table view and height for a row at index path. So for this, basically we might want different heights for different rows, so we sort of need to implement this. Well, I already know that our first row is going to have a height of 200, so we can say if index path dot row equals 0, then return 200, and otherwise we can return 50 for right now. So and we can change that later if we need to. So let's first implement our self for row at index path method for our first row. And for our first row, we'll say if index path dot row equals 0, then we're gonna do this. All right. And what do we want to do? So let's say in our first row, maybe we want to display an image of the place along with what the name of the place is. So here's what we can do. We can let's say here at the top as a class variable we can declare an image view. So we can say var let's say place image view. That's what we can call it. Place image view equals UI image view, and we'll choose a constructor with a frame. And now we can specify its frame, and here's how we make a frame. We use cgrect, and I'll choose the one with cgfloat. So now we can sort of specify, where on the screen this image view starts, and just where it ends, and what all of its dimensions are. So if we if we take a look at the main.storyboard, this point right here, that's x0, y0. So as x gets greater, you move across the screen, and as y gets greater, you move down the screen or view. So that's just something to know while you're dealing with CG Rex and frames. So I'm going to create a place image view, and I want the x on that to be 0. I want it to start from the very edge of the screen, and the y, I'll say 200. It's going to be the or not 200, sorry, it's going to be 0. I want it to start from the top of the screen, and the width, I want it to span the entire screen. And sometimes we don't know what the screen size is, right? Because maybe we made this app for an iPhone 5s, but we want it to run on a 6s. So what we can do for that is we can say UI screen dot main screen dot bounds dot width, and that'll give us the width of the current screen. So we can sort of keep that in mind while programming. And the height, I want it to be as tall as the cell that it's in, so I'll say 200. Alright, so now we have an image view there. So for our image view, sorry, let me get rid of that error. Okay, so for our image view, we want to specify an image, but first, let's go and find a nice image to import for a place. So one nice place to look for images is pixabay.com. And when you're making an app, you usually want images that are free for commercial use and no attribution required, and Pixabay is a great place to find stock photos like that. So let's say we want to look for some nice destination. Let's say Seattle. I like Seattle. All right, it's almost as cool as SF. So let's say I really like this image of the skyline right here. It says free for commercial use, no attribution required. So we'll go ahead and download this, and we downloaded it. And now what we want to do basically is let's take it, and we're gonna go into our app folder and Finder, and just to be a little organized, we're gonna add a new folder in there, and we're gonna call it images, and inside the folder we'll paste the skyline image. I'm gonna rename it and just call it Seattle. And then let's go back to our Xcode project, and we'll go to assets.xcassettes, and we'll import the image by just dragging and dropping it in like that. Okay, so now we have the image. Now let's go back to our view controller, and right in here, so in the view to load method, we can say place image view dot image equals UI image, and we'll construct it using the name of the image. So the name of the image that we want is just Seattle. So okay, that's good. Now I want to make sure that this image does not stretch. So if the size is different than the bounds that we're trying to fit it in, and we don't want it to stretch, and we just wanted to maintain its aspect ratio, then what we can do is we can take the image view and we can set its content mode, and we can say dot, and we'll see all the different things that we can set it to, and we'll say scale aspect fill. And let's say we don't want this image view to exceed its boundaries. So we don't want the image of the image view to exceed its boundaries. So the image view has this frame, right? We don't want the image to go past that. We want it to fit in the frame. So what we can say is clip to bounds equals true. Okay, so now let's say that we don't know if this image is too light or too dark. Let's say we want to just add sort of a black filter on top of it so we can see white text more clearly. Let's say we want to display the name of the place right on top. Okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll go to Google, and we'll just type in black, search for black image view, and search tools, we want to make sure that we're using labels for reuse. We'll find this one image off Wikipedia, and we can save the image as, I'll just call it black, and save it into your project directory. So it's right there, and you are programming demo, awesome. And in our images, okay, cool. So now let's flip back to Xcode and flip back to Finder. Let's go ahead and import that image. So, and we'll use this as a filter. So, and as we continue throughout this, you'll get more of an idea of what we're actually doing and how UI programming feels. So now what we can do is we can declare and assign up here an image view, and we'll just call it black image view, and its frame is going to be the exact same as the one we had before, so we can just copy and paste that in here. Okay, and now we'll say black image view dot image equals UI image named black, and we don't want this to entirely cover the background image that we have of Seattle. We want it to act as sort of a filter, right? So all we're going to do is we're going to set its alpha to something low, like 0.4. Alpha of 1 basically means it's opaque. Alpha of 0.4 means it's sort of like translucent. Okay, so we set its alpha. We'll also say that black image view dot clip to bounds equals true. And once we've done that, then we've customized how we want these image views to look. So the next thing that we're going to do is we want a label. So but before we add that label in, let's just take a look at what's exactly going on here. So in order to do that, in our index path, self-row at index path, right down here, if index path.row equals 0, we'll do cell.add subview place image view, and cell.add subview black image view. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like. Okay, so we have an image here, and it has a black filter over it. So if you can see, it's a little darker than the image was originally. Okay, so now that we have that, I want to sort of add in Seattle right here. I want to say, maybe in white color. So in order to do that, we'll go to the top here, and we'll declare another variable, and we'll call it place name label, and this will be a UI label, right? So usually we'll drag in those labels from here into our storyboard. Right now we can just make one, and we have to give it a frame. So to create a frame, we'll do cgrect, and I usually like to use the one with the float, just because UI screen on main screen dot bounds dot width, this returns a float to you. So x, let's say that we want it to start at 10, because we want a little bit of a margin on the left, and y, let's say we want to center it in this. Then if we're having a height of like 40 for the text label, then what we can do is 200 minus 40, which is 160, and then divide that by 2. So that's 80. So you'll notice when you're trying to figure out all these different values for the frames, you have to do a little bit of math, and that's definitely involved in UI programming. So the width, we'll say UI screen dot dot main screen dot bounds dot width minus 20, because we're starting at 10 off of the screen, 10 from the left of the screen. So if this is 0, then we're starting at 10, and we want to end 10 away. So that's why we have 10 plus 10, 20, 20 pixels left out of the screen. So that's why it'll be the screen width minus 20. And then the height we said was 40. Okay, so now over here we can customize the values that we want for place name label. So for place name label, let's say place name label dot text equals Seattle, and then we can say place name label dot text alignment, we want it to be centered. So usually, when you're assigning a value like this, you can just do equals and then add in a dot, and just that one dot will show you, the different values that you can have. It'll basically just detect what type of value you need. You need an NS text alignment object, so it'll show you different types. So we'll do dot center, then I want to set its text color, so I'll say dot text color, and I'll say UI color dot white color for this. And let's say I want to set its font, so place name label dot font equals UI font. And let's say right now I want Helvetica, and the size, let's say I want something big, like maybe 30. Okay, and we want to make sure that we want to add this to our view right here, cell dot add subview, place name label. And we want to make sure that, since we have 3 subviews in the cell, we want to make sure that this name label is on top of both of the other images, right? So in order to do that, all we need to do just to make sure that that's true is cell dot bring subview to front, and we'll say place name label. So that'll make sure that the place name labels up at the front. So now if we give this a try and run it, cool. So we have background image view, we have a black filter over it, and then we have Seattle as the name right there. Okay, so now let's think about our other cells. And for our other cells, let's say we want to display something like let's say we want to display the common attractions in our first cell, all right? So for that, we'll want, a text label, and we'll want like another text label below it that tells us some of the attractions. So in order to do that, we first want to make sure that we have enough space. So we'll say else return 80 down here for the rest of our rows. And for this next row, we can say if index path dot row equals 1, then we'll do this chunk of code right here that we're going to put. So now we can declare another variable. Oops, sorry, it's supposed to be else if. So now we can declare another variable, and we can say var attractions label, and we can say UI label. And for this, I just want it to be, sort of on the left side of the screen. So, but I want a bit of a margin from the screen's edge. So I'll start it at x equals 10, and y in this case, take a minute, pause the video, and guess what it's gonna be. Okay, y is not gonna be some large value like 200 or 240 or something, because we're adding it to a cell, right? So y is not going to start in this case from the top of the view right here. It's going to start from the top of the cell's view. So let's say this is the cell's view, right? Then it's just going to start from that value right there. So in this case, I just want y to be something small, like I don't know, like 10 maybe, right? So then we can say the width, we can give it something like 200. It's going to be left aligned, so it doesn't really matter too much here what we set the width to. And then the height can be 30. Okay, so now our attractions label, we can go here and set its parameters, and we can say attractions label.text equals attractions. And let's say that I similarly want the font to be quite similar, so I can say attractions label.font equals UI font, or oops, I already copied it, so I'm just going to place it there. And let's say I want it to be of size 18. Okay, so else if index path.row equals 1, then we're going to do cell.add subview attractions label. Okay, so let's give it a run, see how it looks. Okay, so that's pretty large. We probably want to make it a little smaller. You'll also see that, we had four cells, so one, two, three, four. These cells are white, but we wanted, the background of the cell to be sort of like a light gray, and these are showing like that, but these aren't. And that's because the table view's background is that, but by default, it's setting the cell's background color to white. So what we can do is, regardless of the type of cell, up here we can say cell dot background color equals UI color dot clear color, and that'll basically make the cells clear so that the table views color, so which is this nice gray right here, will be shown instead of that white that we're seeing right there. So we can make this a little smaller because it looked a little too big. So we have attractions label there, and then let's say we want to display the attractions like what they actually are, right? So we can say, that's weird, what's going on? Oops, okay. So we can say var um, uh, we can say var things label, for my lack of a better word right now, var things label equals UI label, and the frame we're going to set, let's say we wanted to take up most of the screen, right? So, but we want a bit of a margin, so we'll say 10, so it starts at 10 from the left of the screen. Y, we want to make sure that it's below this and it has maybe a little bit of space between them. So if this starts at y equals 10 and it has a height of 30, then the minimum this could start at would be y equals 40. Let's say we want to give a padding of maybe like 5, so we can start this at 45 instead, and we can now say the width is going to be UI screen dot main screen dot bounds dot width and minus 20, because this will give us the screen's width, but we want to leave 10 on each side of the screen as a margin, and the height, let's say 60 for this one. So now over here, things label dot text equals, let's say, Space Needle Science Center Aquarium and movie theaters and golfing and football, and we can add some more things in about Seattle, like rocky beaches. Beaches aren't as amazing in Seattle, but we can add in, let's say, community fairs and etc. So I just want to make sure that's long because I want to display a tool that you can use. So things label dot let's say font, well, actually we'll just leave it as the regular font. So let's say things label dot text is that, right? So let's see what happens when we add it to the cell subview and then run it. So let's say cell dot add subview things label. Okay, let's say we add that and then we run it. Well, notice is it sort of just goes off the screen, right? We don't really want that. Also, this is maybe a little bit too much spacing for us, so maybe we want to move it up a little bit. And then we want to figure out how to make this multi-lines. So to figure out how to move it up, well, first I want to change the font of this, so to make it a little smaller. So let's say text things label.font equals UI font, and let's say I just want the regular system font, right? So I'll just say system font of size, and I can specify its size. I'll say maybe 14. 14 might be a nice font for that, and I want to move this up, right, instead of y equals 45, because this may not be taking up the whole space. So maybe I'll say y equals 35 for this one, and let's see how it all looks now. So when you're doing UI programming, you usually have to go and check back a lot. So, alright, so it's looking like that, but it's still not all fitting on one line. So why don't we make sure that our label has multiple lines? We can set the number of lines that our label has just by doing label.number of lines. And let's say I can guess we need about 3 here. Alright, so why don't we give that another try now? Okay, so now things are on multiple lines, and the spacing is nice. It's looking pretty good, but one of our issues is that it's it's extending past the cell, so we want to make our cell a little bit bigger. So in order to do that, let's see, this had height at 60 and this had 30, and there's spacing of 5 in between, so 10 plus 30 is 40, and then 60. So why don't we try maybe 100 for the height of the cell. So we can do over here, we can say else if index path.row equals 1, we'll return 100, and otherwise we'll just return, let's say maybe 60. Okay, so give that a try now. Okay, it's looking good there. Now, let's say that the next thing that we want to do is we want to just add in one last cell here, and in this cell we want to add a few buttons. Let's say we want to add like 3 buttons, alright? So when we try on different screen sizes, those buttons can look like really different based off of how the constraints you set if you're using Interface Builder, right? So in this, if we program it well, if we program the UI well enough, then whenever you change screen sizes, like you go from a 5S to a 6S, then everything still works and everything still looks good. So in order to do this, let's first create our buttons. So just like we've been creating everything else programmatically, we're going to create some buttons. And what buttons could we possibly need in this app? Let's say we want to pin this place. Maybe you want to go there later. Okay, so we can say var pin button equals UI button, and its frame. We'll think about that in just a second. Let's name the other 2 buttons, and we'll say var go button. Maybe our app automatically transports you to that place, or maybe the go button's just to tell your friends that I'm going there automatically or something. So, and let's add a last button, and we'll say var. I don't know, what else could we need for this sort of app? Maybe we could need var invite friends button. Okay, var invite friends button equals UI button, and then it's or UI button, and there's a frame. Okay, so now we want to specify these frames. Before specifying the frames, we want to think about what the different values are going to be. So let's type in cgrect, and let's bring up the frame constructor right here, cgfloat1, and let's think about this. So we want the buttons to span the entire width of the screen. We want them to, we want these buttons to together fill up the screen, so we don't just have them all to one side or all to the other, and we don't really know what our screen size is. So accordingly, what we can really conclude is that our button size will depend on the screen size somehow. So let's think about that. One thing that I know is I want some margin on the left and the right. I want to leave, maybe 10 pixels on the left, 10 pixels on the right. And if my buttons are all of height 40 and my cell is of height 60, then I would want y to be 60 minus 40 divided by 2, which is 10, so that there's 10 spacing at the top of the buttons and 10 spacing below. Okay, and then 10 plus 40 plus 10 is 60, so we know the height is 40. Okay, now we want to figure out the width, and then for the width, what it's going to be is UI screen dot main screen dot bounds dot width, and we're leaving 10 on each side, so minus 20. Okay, so we're leaving 10 pixels on each side, and then we also want some spacing between each button. So if we want 10 spacing between each button, then if there's 3 buttons, that means in between the buttons there's 2 spaces. So that's 10 times 2 is 20. So that means there's 40 more pixels of spaces that we need. So 20 plus 20 is 40, So UI main screen.bounds.width minus 40, and then there's 3 buttons, so we'll divide it by 3. And if you don't understand my math, just think about this, draw it out, and work it out, and think, is this math really right? Okay, so next thing that we want to do is we want to make similar frames for these next 2 buttons, except we're going to make some modifications. So if this is starting at 10, we want the next one to start at 10 plus the width of each button plus another 10 for spacing. So we can say 20 plus this thing right here. And similarly, we want the last button to start at 30 plus 2 times this thing right here. Okay, so now we have our frames for these buttons, and I really wanted to go through this button example because I want you guys to understand, that when you're doing some UI programming, you do need to work out the mathematics, and how everything just like fits together. And sometimes pen and paper, just drawing it out helps with that. So now let's customize our buttons. So for our pin button, let's say pin button, and we want to set its title first. So we'll say set title. Notice we don't just do dot text like we do for some other things like labels or text fields. For this we have to do dot set title, and the title I'll say pin in all caps, and say dot normal for the control state. Then let's say I want the pin button's title color to be white, so I'll say dot set title color, and I'll say UI color dot white color, and control state dot normal. And let's say that I want the background for this one to be maybe some sort of blue. Okay, I don't really have like a nice blue on me, but maybe I can find one. So in order to find some colors, and this is also a good thing to keep in mind when you're doing some UI programming, let's say you go to find out some hex colors, right? So you go to an HTML color picker, W3 Schools, pretty popular website, right? So now let's say I really like this blue right here. Okay, I think, hey, sure, maybe that'd look good on an app. So I copy its hex, and then if I go to Google and I just type in hex to UI color, then what that does is, because UI color is based off of RGB values usually, right? That's one of the constructors that we're provided with. This gives us the different RGB values. And you'll notice this notation right here is in Objective-C. So we're just concerned with these values right here, and we can put them into our constructor in Swift. So we had 0.2, 0.6, 1, and 1. So we can say pin button.background color equals UI color, and we'll add a parentheses, and now it'll show us the constructors. And I want this one right here. So it was 0.2, 0.6, and 1, and 1. And that'll give us, the color that we want. So now what we have, we set the title, we set the title color, and we set the background color. But what I also want is I want, the pin button to have curved edges. So to do that, all I need to do is pin button.layer.corner radius, and I can set it to something maybe like 5. Okay. And now we can copy the same thing for the other buttons, and we can say go button, and we can fill that in, and we can say, oops, this should be invite friends button, and we can fill that in as well. And let's say we can call this go, and we can call this invite friends. And now let's say we want to add these cells to our third row, so we can do else if index path.row equals 2, then cell.add subview pin button, and then cell.add subview go button, and then we can do cell.add subview of cell.add subview invite friends button. Okay, so let's open it up and see how it looks. Okay, so that's all fitting, but now we have this issue right here, right? That um, this title label of this button is too long. So I actually, put that on purpose because I want to show you guys how to fix that. And all you need to do in order to fix that is you say invite friends button dot title label. So title label shows up right there. Dot adjust font size to fit width equals true. And that'll basically make sure that all of your text fits within that title label, and it'll adjust the font size accordingly. So now if you notice it fits there, it doesn't look amazing, so you probably want to not space these out evenly, or maybe instead of invite friends you just want to say invite, right? That might look a little bit better. So if you pull that up, okay, yeah, so that looks a little better. So now you'll see, that these are all evenly spaced out, and our screen has a great start. It looks pretty nice. And one more thing that I really want you to realize is that we don't need as many constraints as we do sometimes with when working on the storyboard. So in this case, let's say I switch sizes to iPhone 5s, or I mean iPhone 6s instead of 5s, right? Then if I open up the app in the simulator, and you notice, okay, so right now we have an issue, and that's because we haven't set our table view constraints, right? So let's go ahead and set the table view constraints first. And the constraints that I want to set are just going to be to the edges. So just added those constraints to the table view. Now if we run it on the 6S, it looks just like it did on the 5S. It looks all nice. The image view heights and the spacing and everything is adjusting by itself. And similarly, if we run it on an even larger phone, like let's say a 6S Plus, then accordingly, so you notice the dimensions are different in this, even though the window here appears smaller. The dimensions are actually larger in terms of pixels. So the simulator just, if it went any bigger, it'd be sort of like off the screen. So let's wait for that to open up. And if we notice, it looks beautiful there too. So what you want to realize is that when doing UI programming, oftentimes it really helps your app look nice. So if you look at this was a lot of code, right? We wrote a lot of code in this demo. But at the same time, just by figuring out the different dimensions and the different spacing and using the current screen size while creating your frames, we can make our app look nice on all screen sizes, and we can make sure that nothing looks off. So hopefully that was a good intro to UI programming for you guys, and I'd encourage you to look more into it, and that'll be all for today.